Well, I'm Dennis Cooks here at the Wilson Center working with Bob on South Asia. I'm very delighted to have this opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon's session, Ambassador Jawad, who is Afghanistan's or the representative of the new Afghanistan in Washington. And in a very real sense, he is a representative of the new Afghanistan. If you look at his biography, he left his country, like many of his compatriots, as a refugee at the end of the 1970s, I think in 1980. He had studied in Afghanistan in a French lycée, et il parle bien français, and then he went for further studies. He had become a lawyer, I believe, in Afghanistan. He went to Germany, and er spricht sehr gut Deutsch. And then he came to the U.S. of A., and he ended up living in California and was a practicing attorney, I believe, in San Francisco. And after the events of 9/11, he returned home, and he became worked very closely with President Karzai, first as his press secretary, and then as his chief of staff, and was also in charge of dealing with international relations in the presidency. And in addition, as an attorney with a legal background, he had a very large role to play in pulling together the new Constitution. And he was the link between the presidency and the Constitutional Commission. Ambassador Jawad came here just last November, I believe. We were with a group on our way out to visit Afghanistan, so we had the privilege of meeting with him and consulting with him before the trip, and was tremendously impressed with him at the time, and understand he's doing an excellent job here, and look forward to his remarks this afternoon on the political situation, the Constitution, and so forth. Of course, we have to ask him which language he's going to speak in. But I think maybe he ought to speak in English. So, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Cox. It's a pleasure to be here. I prepared a speech on the Afghan Constitution. But I think I'm not going to read this. Reading speeches are boring. So if you want a copy of it, my staff will have it. Let's have frank discussions about what's going on in Afghanistan, what we are up to, what we've accomplished, and what's ahead of us. But before I do this, I would like to thank all the distinguished fellows that are here. It's an honor to be among some of the best Afghan scholars here. Professor Maley is here, and so is Mr. Barfield and others. It's a pleasure to be among such a distinguished group of people. And I would like to thank Woodrow Wilson Center for organizing this event. I'd like to talk about the Afghan new constitution mainly, but also would like to talk about some of the achievement of the Afghan government and also the challenges that we are facing. In the past 2 years, we have sustained the policy of building national institutions in Afghanistan and continue to craft inclusive political processes. This is a difficult exercise in Afghanistan, and sometimes the focus being maintaining stability in Afghanistan, we fell short of delivering justice and fell short of delivering all the expectations that the people of Afghanistan had from us. But we thought unless we have a stable Afghanistan, unless we maintain the stability in Afghanistan, we were not going to be able to deliver on any other promises that we have made to the people. On January 4th, President Karzai signed the new constitution into law. Initially a group of 6 people, and then later about a group of close to 30 people actually worked on the initial draft of the constitution with the consultation of some international experts, including experts from France, Professor Carcassonne, and from the United States, from South Africa, even one of the distinguished experts of constitutional law from South Africa helped us. For me, it was a very interesting exercise, being trained in here in a legal system in the U.S. and other. When we started, we thought that we will draft a constitution with more or less a minimalist approach to just cover really the basic principles that's needed to guide Afghanistan for the next 50 years. But once we've started the process, and particularly after talking with some experts from South Africa, we realized that for us the most important measure is to make the transition. If you don't make the transition in the next 2-3 years, there will not be 50 years down the road for us. So the Constitution that initially I was thinking that would have something like 70 articles turned out to be a Constitution with 176 articles altogether. It includes a lot of measures that you don't see in other constitutions. And the reason for that is that while we are working on the Constitution, while we are drafting the Constitution, we had the luxury of having access to some of the best experts available internationally. That was one reason that the Constitution goes into a lot of details that otherwise look unnecessary. And then the other thing is that in most other countries that are not in post-conflict situation, the enabling laws, the secondary laws in place, so if you cover the principles in the Constitution, then you're fine. But in our case, the enabling laws are either non-existent or outdated. So we put a lot of articles in the Constitution that generally when you read it, you wonder why it's there. Is this a constitutional matter? Sometimes no, it's not. But it's needed to provide for a smooth transition. And the Constitution of Afghanistan is a balanced charter. It's not the best Constitution ever written. We didn't want it. The best Constitution ever written is the Constitution of Soviet Union that provides for heaven on earth. So, we couldn't afford that. So we were practical. We were pragmatic. It seeks balance in many areas. It seeks a balance between a strong presidential system and a parliamentary system, and the wishes of the locals to run their local affairs. Why a strong presidential system in Afghanistan? Because we need to build the national institutions in Afghanistan. Unless the national institutions are built in Afghanistan, there will be no future for Afghanistan. There will be a lot of discussion about respecting the rights and the violations of provinces to run their local affairs. This is very legitimate. This is the only way to create democracy in a society. But the fact is that people who claim to represent people on the provinces, on the countryside, are people who've imposed their rule by gun. The traditional institution of Afghanistan that provided for traditional leadership are gone through war and violence. So it was a very delicate exercise. You really cannot build a democracy unless you provide equal chance, unless you provide for a strong parliamentary system. Well, but you can imagine the way things are going right now, that the next parliament of Afghanistan, the elections are scheduled for September, will be filled with a lot of elements that you and I don't want to see as part of the building democratic process in Afghanistan. I'm afraid that the parliament might be filled with drug barons, warlords, and alike. Why? Because we can issue a decree authorizing the formation of political party, even if you've done so, but you cannot create a political party by a decree. This is a culture that takes time. Political parties based on national vision takes a lot of time in Afghanistan. So while we understood the importance of the parliamentary system, we had to keep it under control to the extent possible, because realistically we can imagine what kind of parliament it's going to be. Of course, same concerns are also right about the president. What if a dictator? What if someone takes power with? So that's why a balance should have been reached to provide for a strong presidency, but also for a parliament with extensive power of inquiry. The president cannot dissolve the parliament, for instance, and the president can be impeached. There's a procedure on how the parliament can impeach the president. The second balance that we were trying to reach was how to respect and maintain the traditional and social values of Afghanistan, being a traditional society, being a country active in forefront of war against terrorism, extremism, and Al-Qaeda, and therefore its Islamist credential always under question by its enemy. How to keep the good traditional values of Afghanistan, but yet keep a forward-looking position, keep take Afghanistan where we want to take Afghanistan. That was the second balance that we had to reach, and a very, very important one for us. So basically, the parliament right now provides that almost 25% of the lower house will be, actually more than 25% now, of lower house will consist of women delegates. Right now we have 34 provinces in Afghanistan. In each province has to send 2 women delegates to the lower house. At the Senate level, the president appoints 1/3 of the delegates, and from that 1/3, half must be women. This is a very high quota actually for any country, for Islamic or non-Islamic. It's much higher than the quota here in Washington, in fact. And again, this is not to please someone, because we know it really doesn't mean much if you have the best decree on the book that provides for equal rights for women. It has to be implemented. That's why we put a lot of emphasis on education. That's why we put a lot of emphasis on building national institutions. But the reason that we are also pushing strongly, or the government is pushing strongly to the extent possible for women's rights, is because I was in a Kabul during the Loya Jirga. Afghan women were the most liberal, the most constructive bloc of vote available. They were not divided on ethnic issues because they were the prime victim of war and violence. So they knew what it means if Afghanistan go back to the days of war and violence and anarchy. So to build a civil society in Afghanistan, it's important to push for women's rights. And that's why you see that the fundamentalists and extremists in Afghanistan are very afraid of any improvement in the women's rights, because they see this as a direct threat. One of the achievements of the Constitution that sometimes is overlooked is that it prohibits formation of political parties based on ethnicity in Islamic school of thought. This is common in our neighborhood in Afghanistan and in neighboring countries. And if this has to be implemented, and in order to implement that, we have to push for a civic organization to gain strength and a civil society to be created. There's a more detailed discussion of the Constitution in my speech, and you can have a copy of it. But I would rather leave some more time for an exchange, and answer your questions. And the Constitution of Afghanistan, for the first time, obligated Afghanistan to obey to the international norms and the convention that Afghanistan is a part of. Of course, all of these conventions are much more liberal than the Afghan laws are there. So this is, although it's a minor article in Afghanistan, but it could be used in a very positive way to push for human rights and also to push for adherence to the international conventions. The Afghan Constitution is just another example that Afghanistan have come a long way in 2 short years. The fact that in Berlin we have received $4.5 billion for our next fiscal year, and that was exactly the amount that we were asking for, indicates that the international community, the European community, the United States, have a large degree of assurance that our vision and our plan will work for the future. Today, Afghanistan is emerging as a model gradually. The Afghan Constitution, as I mentioned, it's a document that will be a source of inspiration for many other countries, many other places. When I saw the draft of the provisional constitution for Iraq, and I realized that they are requiring for a 25% quota for women, then I was thinking of having our Constitutional Commission sue them for copyright violations. But this is good news, so we're not going to do it. So, we are hoping that the commerce is taking root in Afghanistan, and we see the future of Afghanistan and the neighboring countries, Pakistan, Iran, and others, in commerce. Our trade, despite difficulties that we have with Pakistan on fighting terrorism, our trade with Pakistan was close to $500 million, the official figure. The unofficial could be close to $1 billion. So we really emphasize on building the regional relations around trade and commerce. And that's why we put a lot of emphasis on building the infrastructures in Afghanistan, the roads. And as you know, the road from Kabul to Kandahar is completed, and we have secured funding for 5,000 kilometers of the ring road and other connecting roads to the neighboring countries. And the construction for all these roads are underway. The Kabul-Bamyan roads being built with the assistance of Italian. Kabul-Kandahar is completed with the assistance of Japan, United States, and Saudi Arabia. Kandahar-Herat is underway. Herat-Spinbuldak is completed. Herat Islam Kala is completed, and Kandahar Spinbuldak is underway. Kabul Jalalabad first phase has been completed. So it's go on, and this is for us very important. It's the roads for us is important because first it reconnects the region through Afghanistan, and then also enhance the national unity. It provides for connection for people. The trip from Kandahar to Kabul used to take 24 hours. Now it's only 4 hours. So this is a big enhancement for trade, for security, for interaction among people. And we push for that. Initially, when I started, I came about 2 years ago here, meeting some officials here in Washington. People were not sure if the roads are really a great project, if this was a real priority for Afghanistan. And it turned out that it is. And still, we will continue pushing on that because we have to create the infrastructure for the private sector to move in. We see the private sector at the end of the day is the real engine of the growth in Afghanistan, but we have to provide that. We just hosted an ECHO conference in Kabul. Actually, it's going on yesterday and today. 10 countries got together. This is the first international conference in Kabul after the changes in Afghanistan. And Hyatt Hotel is investing in Afghanistan again. The groundbreaking was like a week ago. They're investing for $40 million. Mobile phone companies have invested. So the prospects of investment in Afghanistan is really bright. We had an economic growth rate of 30% last year, and we would like to maintain this at 20% this year. And over long range of 10 years, we would like to keep it at 9%. That's the only way that will enable us to keep the legal economy stronger than the drug economy in Afghanistan. On the financial policies, from very early on, we came out with the National Development Framework. We asked the international community what our priorities are and where we wanted the money to be spent. And again, the document that was produced in Berlin is Securing Afghanistan's Future. It's an outstanding document for any other post-conflict countries. It's a close to 100-page document. It basically says what we need and where we're going to spend it and why we need it. So it's important for us to build the capacity of the government to deliver services, but also to be on the driving seat when it comes to using the resources. Of course, we cannot do this completely because of lack of human resources in Afghanistan. We have introduced a new currency, and the exchange rates stayed stable since the new currency was introduced, and we did it in a matter of 3 months. I was in a meeting with Mr. Koizumo in Japan when President Karzai discussed our plan. They couldn't believe it that something like that could be done in 3 months, and we did it. We did it using helicopters, cars, donkeys, everything to get this money to different parts of the country, and with no security incident whatsoever. And we've collected 17 trillion worth of 17 trillion Afghani in currencies and burned them and exchanged them with the new currency. So, and then again, a lot of discussion about security issues for the election. The election for the Loya Jirga, the constitutional Loya Jirga, about 4 months ago when it took place, no, in December actually, it took place with no incident. The problem of the election in Afghanistan is not going to be so much of a security problem. It's going to be a logistical problem on how to reach the people, and we can discuss about that if needed. Basically, after years of 3-digit inflation, right now we are experiencing an inflation-free environment for business and investment in Afghanistan. In one of the programs that Afghanistan have introduced, and it's been a small program but successful, is the National Solidarity Program. Very basic concept of lending $20,000 to each village throughout the country. Each village, every village in Afghanistan will get $20,000. They get to elect their development councils, and those councils will set the priorities on how the money should be used. This is a good exercise because it gives the ownership to the people, and also it's a good exercise in democracy. And and proper management. Unfortunately, the implementing part has to be done by NGOs and others because the resources are not there. I hope that will also develop. We continue to face security challenges of two natures. At the south, basically terrorist infiltration, most of them of cross-border nature. At the north, internal fighting between different militias and groups. And to overcome these challenges, we have to build our national institutions. And we have to, unfortunately, we have to continue to seek external support on the security sector. We are reforming our national security directorate, which is a leftover of the Soviet-style organization. On the book, it implies 35,000 people. Reality is probably not the case, but basically what we are facing is not only the problem of narcotics, warlords, but also a Soviet mindset among our bureaucrats. It's also a lack of ethics and a mentality that's unfortunately a leftover of the war and violence of the past 10 years. As I mentioned, education is our highest priority. 5.6 million children are going back to school, largest number ever in the history of Afghanistan. Close to 30% are women, particularly on the lower grade. But still, we need to build 2,500 schools. The United States is building 1,000 in the past for the next 2 years or so. Japan has just rebuilt 150 schools. Today, only 29% of schools in Afghanistan has a roof on it, and 70% of them needs major repair. Most of the schools, when you go in Afghanistan, the countrysides are held under a tent or just on plain air. Kids are sitting, but the determination is there. People are really determined. That I was in Kabul back in September of last year. The terrorists burned a small school in Mughal Khel, close to Logar, and the school consisted of a tent. That was it. The school was a tent. And the next day, there was a photo taken by AFP that might be still online. All the kids, all the little girls, came to the school, showed up, and they were sitting next to this burned-out tent, next to the ashes of the tent, and it insisted on continuing with their education. This is the determination and the mentality of the Afghan people. They know what it means to suffer in a war and violence and anarchy. They're very determined to make sure that the country does not go back to the days that it was. We face a lot of challenges. I'm frank about it. We face the challenges of building a nation while starting from scratch, while everything was destroyed in Afghanistan. As I mentioned, lack of human capital is one of the most important things. Funding, equipments, and others could be imported, but human capital and skills cannot be imported. And if you import it from outside, it's extremely expensive. It could be ineffective. You have to build it in Afghanistan. We have to improve local and district governance. We don't have the means to reach every part of Afghanistan to deliver services to them, and we are not able because we don't have the resources, we don't have the car, we don't have the equipment, and we don't have also the qualified people. We know that many district administrators, even governors, are people who are not qualified to do this job. But it's hard to find someone to replace them. Even if politically you are able to remove that person, a really qualified person to do this job is very hard to get. Lack of human capital in Afghanistan is tremendous. I am here at the embassy. While I have a strong and large Afghan community, it's hard for me to find someone to work at the embassy because the Afghans who are successful were making a lot more money. They're not going to be working for $1,000 or $2,000 a month that I'm paying them at the embassy. It's tremendous. Or they have the skills, they're successful in what they're doing, but they lack the skills that I need at the embassy. It takes time. And that's why, for us, managing the expectation of the people was one of the most difficult tasks. Because when people hear that in Kabul, in Afghanistan, when people hear that $4 billion has been allocated to Afghanistan for the next fiscal year, they divide it by the population, and they think that everyone will get something out of it. And they come and ask us, where is my money? And that's what the case is, and that's why a lot of, in many instances, you see complaint, and people are entitled. Of course, we have not been able to deliver what we were supposed to because of lack of resources, and particularly lack of human capital, and also some political problems. As I mentioned, all Afghans have not benefited from peace dividend. We know that. And we must eliminate in Afghanistan corruption. It's connected to drugs. We must eliminate in Afghanistan nepotism. This is a problem. This undermines our recovery process. And we must eliminate the rule of gun. The clashes in Iraq and Faryab once again proved that we are not going to be able to build a civil society in Afghanistan as long as private militias and rule of gun and mentality of gun is there. And that could be only done by helping Afghans build the national institutions once and also providing for the short term and the security that we need from external sources. In addition to the general challenges that we are facing to build the nation, now we are facing specific challenges of implementing our new constitution, while our judges and our attorneys are making $40 a month. And while our people do not have any electoral experience, while political parties, in most instances for Afghan, meant Tanzim, that was created in Pakistan, that basically a military organization formed around a personality or an ethnic affiliations. We have to introduce and help people come up with national visions, parties with a vision, make people to come out of their small valley, of the small village, see the beautiful country that's out there. And that takes time again. These things cannot be done by decree. And we are looking forward to the expansion of ISAF and PRTs. Right now we have 12 PRTs operational. We are hoping to have 16 by the election. They are doing a tremendously good job. I know some NGOs don't like them, but I think over the long run they will prove themselves to be beneficial, and they have done it so far. And the most important thing is to accelerate the process of DDR, demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration of the militias in Afghanistan. And President Karzai introduced a new plan that by June of this year, at least 40,000 people will be demobilized. Again, so far the demobilization process has been a voluntary process, like sending a card, their warlord, please disarm. So there's so much that you can expect from that process. It has to have some muscle into it, and that could be only provided by the international community. And as I mentioned, there's no way to build a civil society in Afghanistan as long as the culture of gun and the warlords are there. Narcotics, I'm going to end with that. Narcotics is a serious challenge for us. We see direct connection between narcotics, terrorism, and warlords. They feed each other. The money that came from the proceeds of the sale of drugs, which sells for 100 times more than the farm gate price in Europe and other places, is used to finance terrorism, criminal element throughout Asia and Europe, and also finance the destabilizing activities of warlords in Afghanistan. For us, it's to our national interest to fight narcotics. But there's so much that we can do. What we are asking for is we have to mobilize every available resources, ours and that of international community, to fight that, including military assets if needed, to go after labs in Afghanistan, labs that produce heroin and others. We have come up with a national drug strategy, but again, the implementation is the most important part of it. It include a law enforcement component, an alternative livelihood, but overall, the fight against narcotics in Afghanistan should be seen as in the context of fighting terrorism. Otherwise, it will not work. If we make, say, UK in charge of it and allocate $50 million, it's not going to work. It has to be a comprehensive plan that every available asset in Afghanistan should be mobilized against it. Otherwise, it will criminalize our economy. And to some degree, it already has. Again, to overcome all these challenges, the Afghan people needs and demand the cooperation of the international community. And the sooner and the more this cooperation and this assistance are delivered to Afghanistan, the less expensive it will be. It will cost more. Look at our fight against narcotics. Slow action have had a very costly consequences for all of us, for Afghan government, for the international community, for everyone. So we would like to see a larger degree of investment in the partnership with the Afghan people. what we are asking for, what we are looking for, is a partnership with the international community to make Afghanistan a safer place and therefore the world. We are giving handouts is not going to help in Afghanistan. The international community has spent $2 billion the past 2 years to prevent humanitarian emergencies in Afghanistan. We will be sending more than that if you don't build the national institutions in Afghanistan. I'll end with that, saying that our people really believe in engagement with the international community. And the leadership of the Afghan government, President Karzai, has proven to be a viable partner for the international community. We should make sure that people of Afghanistan don't feel that this trust is misplaced. Thank you.
Well, we'll open the floor for questions now. The gentleman in the front, could we pass the microphone down, please? Wilson, thank you.
I'm Al Milliken, affiliated with Washington Independent Writers. Since you named Islam in the Afghanistan Constitution, in writing and then implementing the Constitution, what input did you get from other Islamic nations? Did you hear from Turkey? Did you hear from nations where Sharia Islamic law is being implemented? And what role did Pakistan play?
A number of the scholars who were involved in drafting the Constitution in Afghanistan were trained in Egypt, which historically provided a good example of combining the civil law system, which basically is the French system, and the Islamic laws. The content of the Afghan Constitution, of course, does not push for a secular system as the Constitution of Turkey. Pakistan Constitution has been modified many times. And it was modified in different conditions and situations. We did seek input from experts from Islamic countries. We looked into the models, and actually our experts were trained in Egyptian model more or less, because in Afghanistan we do have a civil law system. We have a civil code, a penal code, a commerce code, a codified system like that of France. Therefore, in many instances, the need for application of Sharia rarely arise, because in a given matter there is a law on the book that could be implemented and is implemented. We are revising some of these. The Afghan penal code is being revised with the consultation of some legal experts here in the United States.
My name is Maley.
You want to wait till we get the microphone?
My name is Maley Volpe. I'm with U.S. Afghanistan Reconstruction Council. It's a nonprofit NGO that's based in Washington and also in Kabul. I just wanted to tell the ambassador that he said something very fundamental that stands in the face of proponents of parliamentary system in Afghanistan, and that is the void of a legitimate leadership within the regions. I think that it's a misconception on the part of international community to recognize these figures as representatives of their culture. In fact, I think that some of the anti-terrorism policy, especially from the United States, actually empowers these very powers that prevent the immersion of legitimate grassroots regional leadership in Afghanistan that could one day support a parliamentary system. And meanwhile, I have noticed in my work that there is real reluctance to build the institutions of Afghanistan, the legitimate government institutions of Afghanistan, because of accusations of corruption. And a lot of that has been, in my experience, has shown that it's because of lack of resources. We have individuals that are extremely talented, that have the credentials, and they're running a government without any resources. So yes, that definitely gives rise to corruption. So it seems like the chicken and the egg. We won't empower these institutions. We won't build them because there's corruption, but there's going to be corruption if there's no resources. That's one of the things. And that was just a comment I wanted to make. And also my assessment is that some of the issues that we're having with warlords in the regions and their power in the regions, it could be addressed with some funding that matches the incentive that these warlords provide to their militia. It's not that much. The U.S. Army right now, they're getting paid $60 a month. and a warlord can afford to pay them a lot more than that. Is this something that you can agree with? Is there anything else that, what is your opinion on what would disempower some of these warlords in the regions? Because they're not ideal, they're not cultural ideals, they're not icons. They're there by force, and they're there because they can pay. So I want to know what your opinion would be on disempowering them, aside from giving them money to help us in the war against terrorism.
You're absolutely right. If we provide for better opportunity for people to have a decent, a dignified life, nobody want to kill or get killed for someone else if he has another option to have a dignified life. Even though every member of those militias, they're people like you and me. They want to have a decent life. They want to have their kids to go to school, but they have no other options. They have first lack of education. Then also the only thing that they know that is the Kalashnikov that they had for the past 30 years. So if they give them an alternative, they will certainly take it. But of course, along with the alternative, the skills should be there. When we were building the Afghan National Army initially, we asked some groups and some people to send in volunteers from different parts of the country. And people were coming with the militia mentality. They were thinking that working in the Afghan National Army means learning some English, hanging out with Americans, and just having fun and getting paid $60 or $70 a month. Once they enrolled, they came in the training started. They realized, no, that's tough. That's really, this is an army here. They're talking serious. Some of them left. That's why you see a lot of reports on the media that people, members are leaving. They're leaving for two reasons. First, they cannot take the discipline. They're not used to it. They were fighters for 20 years, but fighters that they fight when they like it. There was no discipline, and then also we are paying them $60 or $70 exactly a month, which was a good salary when we started 2 years ago. But today, with the economic growth on the market, they can make much more than that. They can make. When I went back to Kabul, making $1 a day was a good salary. Now they're making up to $5. So, but that the amount that we are paying to the members of the Afghan National Army has not changed. So that's why they're leaving. And same thing is true if there are other alternatives for the people. They will certainly, but they have to be there. That's why it's part of the disarmament program. There has to be a component of giving them some kind of skills, not only money for the gun, so they can use that skills to have a dignified life.
I wonder if I might ask a double-barreled question. I wonder if you could elaborate. You alluded to the difficulty in establishing political parties, and then you talked about the past practice. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that. And also, one thing that has struck me, one of the real problems, and I don't know how one gets at it, is the difficulty of the central government to collect taxes, to generate revenues dependent, I guess at present it's largely dependent upon contributions from the warlords, from Ismail Khan. And when do you see, at what point does that all change?
On the political parties, as I mentioned, the past history is painful. When I was the chief of staff of President Karzai, and we were preparing for the Loya Jirga election and others, we debated, we discussed the issues of forming a political party for the president because I wanted to be reelected. But the issue is that he can carry a lot more weight as a national leader right now than being a leader of a political party, because the leader of a political party in Afghanistan is right now conceived as being someone operating more or less on a factional agenda, not a national agenda. So the past experiences, the past history is for us, is painful, and it will probably slow down the formation of real political parties. The secular political parties that were formed in the cities, the left parties and others, they went to an extreme, and they antagonized the people too. Many of the extreme right and left parties were not around ethnic affiliations. The communists or Hizb Islami, for instance, has members from different ethnic. Hizb Islami later on actually acquired this identity of operating based on ethnicity. Initially, they were against ethnicity, and their members were from many ethnic groups. Yes, this is a problem. That for the problem in Afghanistan is, the good news in Afghanistan is the moderate and moderation is in majority in Afghanistan. The bad news is that these are very unorganized. A question was raised by a gentleman over there, I think, about why some of the fundamentalist group and parties are lingering, because they were the only one that have access to organization in the past years during the Jawad in the 70s and 80s. They acquired the tools, the skills, and the money to be mobilized and organized, and others didn't have. So the experience of the resistance parties help some of the fundamentalist group right now to use the same tools, the same organization that existed before. They are more experienced in how to mobilize people and how to organize people. On the question of taxes, it's two things. One is building national institutions to really exactly to know how much. If we know exactly how much Ismail Khan or Ghulam Shirzoi in the past were collecting from Kandahar or Iraq, we would have been in a better position to ask him, look, you're getting $1 million a day, where is it? Because of the lack of the institution, we don't have that number yet. And this is one problem. Of course, they are resisting. They're keeping the national revenue for their own, and this is against the Afghan constitution. But on the other hand, we don't have the necessary capability and the capacity to know exactly how much it is, and also the national institution is not that strong that if we send someone in there, then he will do a perfect job of sending all the revenues back to Kabul. It will in order to overcome first the political issues of to finish the rule of this, to implement the rule of law in Afghanistan and implement the constitution of Afghanistan. That's one thing. And then in addition to that, to build the national institutions for us to monitor and collect the revenues.
Please.
You're speaking to the mic.
She's bringing you the mic.
Roy Gutman of USIP and Newsweek. Can you just bring us up to date on the security issues in the north and in the west? I mean, whom, especially in Herat? What is the role of the international community? How do you see the outcome? And then also the same in the north.
Well, after we have sent about 1,500 ANA Afghan National Army soldiers in Herat, so that the situation is calm. That's for sure. Ismail Khan has been in consultation with the Afghan government. He's coming to Kabul. The situation in Faryab developed after Dostum sent his troop to the province, to the center of the province, and he had retreated his troop back, and the situation is calm and stable at this point. And we will have to see what kind of measure will be taken in the future, particularly in Faryab, where the governor is not back in the province, so and he has to go back and reinstall.
And what was the role of the international community? How did they assist in this, bringing you to this supposed stability?
They could have played a more positive role on that. Some of the statements that were made were damaging, like saying we will not get involved. This is an internal matter. It is not. It's part of the building national institutions and enhancing security in Afghanistan, and it's not an internal matter. It is. That's why that's my personal position and opinion. They could have played a bigger role, and they should. As I mentioned, they should.
You've indicated a certain degree of skepticism about political parties, but you went on to talk about the fact that the moderates are not mobilized, and when they're not mobilized, it's the extremist parties, and certainly that's been the history of the country. And you also said that, in effect, the president wants to be above the fray. Well, I wonder whether you can have all of those things. Because unless you have and encourage political parties, and perhaps ideally even give them more time to organize than this election is doing, unless you have that, obviously the advantage is going to lie with the extremist parties. And unless the president is willing to play a role in this mobilization of the moderates, how can he possibly expect to work together with a legislative body in which he will have no ability, because they're not sharing an affiliation, he will have no ability, it seems to me, to really effectively influence. So that, at its best, the political party is a vehicle here by which the executive is able to work cooperatively through discipline with the parliament. But if he absents himself from that, where then does he go above the parliament? Does he reach out to the people? How then can he be effective in public policy?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and it's not only a question, it's also a concern for people who are really interested to see democracy and rule of law flourish in Afghanistan. At this point, President's intention is to reach to the people, because it might be something difficult to do. But the fact is that those extremists who have organizations, they are away from the people. They are small in number but very effective. The moderates are large in number but rather ineffective because of lack of organization. So the objective right now is to keep President Karzai as a leader above political parties, and to reach directly the people of Afghanistan, who are mostly, all of them actually, are unorganized and are at least not organized in political parties. But again, I understand this is a difficult exercise to achieve, but nothing has been really easy in Afghanistan. We have to, as I mentioned, we're balancing different things at the same time. So we have to, and that's why I started my speech by saying that our objective in the past 2 years were to maintain stability and to really to keep everybody in tent as much as possible. And but I completely understand your concerns, your points, and this is the advice that has been given by many other friends of Afghanistan, that in order to really we should have a long-term plan and start working and mobilizing the moderates. I think they should be done, but it should. There's no question that the moderates in Afghanistan needs to be organized, and the international community can play some limited role in that, because their constitutional constraint on how much could be done on that. But it's better if it's done without the president's involvement, and still keep the president as a national leader above this kind of. But again, this is a debate that's going on.
Ben?
Mr. Ambassador, Ben Fitzgerald, could you talk a little bit more about the roles of both Iran and Pakistan? Because on the one side, there's ostensibly very cordial official relationships, and yet both governments appear to be involved in a very duplicitous game with their proxies internally. Could you discuss that and what the prospects are?
Despite the fact that we are a member of a coalition and a very close friend and ally of the United States, our relations with Iran has been cordial, particularly with the reform-minded wing of the government in Iran. Iran has their own internal issues. There are multiplicity of power structures and points, and sometimes some of these groups, some of the elements might not be as cooperative as President Khatami is actually in his relation with Afghanistan. There's a good relation and understanding at the top level between President Karzai and President Khatami, and they meet rather regularly. And Iran has been very cooperative and forward-coming in the rebuilding of Afghanistan. They are building roads. They are involved in many projects, and even the private sector, or the Iranian private sector, is also taking a large role in Afghanistan and seeing this as an opportunity. Pakistan, we have no option but to have the best relation with Pakistan, and we see the future of the country. We see our future, the future of the region, and trade in good relations with Pakistan. from our experiences in Afghanistan, other countries in the region, we know that there is no way that anyone can use extremism as a selective tool of policy. It will come back and hunt everybody in the region, at home and anywhere. We really welcome the degree of the cooperation that Pakistan is increasingly providing, but more can be done. There's no doubt about that. Much more could be done, and it's to the best national interest of Pakistan and Afghanistan to do more. That's all, I think.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Sure, no, you already did. That's all right.
We have time just for one more question. Deepa?
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, Deepa Olapale from GW. You mentioned that commerce and trade were what you saw as a way of building relationships in the region, and this is to extend further that. Of course, Afghanistan's it's attractive just lies in the fact that it is such a transit route, and so then it begs the question of the natural gas pipelines as a possibility. And I'd like to know what the current thinking is in Afghanistan about the prospects of that. And to that extent, of course, Pakistan becomes very important, as does the Indian market, which makes it economically viable. But how do you see the fact that, because given the fractious relationship between India and Pakistan, do you see a way around this that would benefit not just Afghanistan but a more regional market?
Yeah, the pipeline that's supposed to be constructed from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan, Pakistan, all the way to India is a very attractive project for us. If constructed, Afghanistan will receive about $150 million transit fees. I'm familiar with this project because at one point I went to Turkmenistan to negotiate the terms. And we are enthusiastic. We really want this project to take place, and so is Turkmenistan very much, because they want and they need an outlet to the south. They're extremely interested in this project. But this project will be feasible through the truth if we get some major oil company interested to finance it, because we're talking about more than $1 billion investment. And this magnitude of investment will be made only if the people are assured that the end market, which is India, is willing to buy this. So any kind of improvement between the relation between Pakistan and India will help tremendously us. This is, again, another example that we really are pushing for openness at the regional level, because we will benefit from better relation, from less tension between India and Pakistan, from better relation between any countries. Central Asian republics will benefit tremendously if they open up their borders further. The end market for that, for the pipeline and the gas, is basically India, because Pakistan, and particularly in CV, has enough gas for now, at least. So and I don't think that if the relations improve, then there will be no concern of giving like a choke point to Pakistan. And we hope that with the improvement of the relations between Pakistan and India, that project will be viable and implemented. For us, the arrangement is that we not only get transit fees, but we can also pump in or out gas if we need it. So the way the agreement is worked out is tremendously advantageous to Afghanistan.
Well, all right, we'll take one final question. Final. We have the mic? Well, maybe we try without the mic.
Here we are talking about, I'm Majid Khan from the University of Maryland. Here we're talking about the democracy, and the democracy always need a liberal society. And as you mentioned in your speech that you have a very conservative society. So, and all the time culture and society will dictate who comes to rule. How you see that in future that there will be, separation between the mosque and state?
Well, we should not just pick one aspect of democracy. Democracy and the rule of law is much more than that. And a lot of traditional societies have a lot of values that enhance the spirit of free market, for instance, like in Afghanistan, or other values that help the establishment of democracy in a society. For us, it's important to have a gradual approach. We don't, as the Afghan constitution shows, we don't see any contradiction between, for instance, Islam and democracy. If it's used properly in a gradual manner, there are a lot of values that could be mutually reinforcing. We see the future of our country, of the region, in democracy and free market economy. There's no doubt about that. But in the meantime, we are using the traditional institutions to further enhance the establishment and the strengthening of democratic rule.
Well, I think with that, we draw to a close to this keynote part of the address. I hope you'll join me in thanking the ambassador. And Bob has a word to say to the instructions for us.
Well, thank you, Dennis, for your customarily good job. Mr. Ambassador, I believe this is your first visit to the Wilson Center. We trust it will not be your last.
Thank you.
We would like to invite you, if you're able to stay for a few minutes and talk and have some coffee and tea outside. As I indicated earlier, there is immediately out these two doors light refreshments. Marvin Weinbaum is going to get us started again in about 15 to 20 minutes, so don't stray.
And there are also copies of the ambassador's written remarks outside.